Hey folks, how are you today? This is Dr. B from Steps to the Future, coming to you with college and career conversations. Before we begin and before I introduce our guests, I want to do an update on a scholarship that I mentioned to you a couple of weeks ago. So you know that on July 25th, it was my 10th anniversary of Steps to the Future, and I wanted to do something to honor someone who was very special in my life, and that was my late mother. So I told you that I was planning on starting a scholarship in her name. I had a conversation with Cameron Sims over at the Cumberland Community Foundation to find out what the steps are that I need to take in order to create this scholarship. So thanks to Cameron, and after a conversation with my siblings, we will be putting this into play. So again, look for more information on that. I know I had said that I'd probably get it up on my website the week of August 25th. However, I wanted to make sure that I was doing this in a way that would be sustainable. So like I said, after talking to Cameron, she gave me some great ideas, some great paperwork, and that will be coming up hopefully sometime in September. I hopefully will get it all going so that for those of you who would like to donate to the scholarship, you'll have a place to do it. So we will be back in a couple of seconds, and you'll get to meet my guest and hear from someone who has been a part of my professional life since I've been here in Fayetteville. So hold on, folks, and we'll be right back. Okay, and we are back. So I'd like to bring on the screen now this evening's guest. This is I'm messing up your name. I can't believe it. Darsweil Rogers. Darsweil is a former executive with JP Morgan. He is the co-owner of Sisters Cuisine Incorporated in Harlem, a restaurant that he co-owns with his son. He's also a business advisor, a coach, and a trainer, and he's an HBCU grad. The real HU, Howard University. Yes. So Darsweil, I was sitting here earlier today saying, when did I really first meet you? And it had to be not too long. So I moved to North Carolina, the tail end, like between Christmas and New Year's of 2010. Started my business in 2011. So I'm pretty sure I'd already started my business when I met you, but I met you at a book discussion. And this was the book. I said, I got to find this because so it was called The Unwitting Pioneer, and it was Marshall Isler. Isler. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep. And that little place that I don't even know if it exists anymore. It was on Person Street.
Yeah.
It's on Person
Street from the office. Yeah. And our memories are identical. That's the day I met you.
Yes, that is the first day.
And I remember it because it was the accent that got me. I'm like, she's not from Fayetteville.
No, she isn't. She is not from Fayetteville.
She's not from Fayetteville.
Yes. For those of you that are watching, please join in. We want you to be part of this conversation. So put your comments in the chat section and make sure you join in this conversation. So Darsweil, I know that you are from LA. How did you tell me about your journey from LA to Howard to New York to Fayetteville?
Yeah, quite a trek for sure. I was let me just say that as a high school student, you can put me in the category of an aimless kid.
Okay.
I was not a scholar by anyone's definition. My high school counselor told me I didn't have the aptitude for college and I should go to trade school.
Oh.
And my uncle, who lived in Maryland and was a Howard grad, he worked for the Navy, so he'd come out to LA to test weapon systems and stuff, and I'd go pick him up at the airport. And so my mom is having her problems. What am I going to do with this boy, right? What am I going to do with this boy? So he says, well, why didn't he apply to Howard? And my mom looked at me and said, you want to apply to Howard? Frankly, I didn't really know a lot about Howard. I knew, but I didn't know. And I said, yes, we applied, and I got in. Now, I've got 3 uncles, 2 aunts, and 2 cousins that finished Howard ahead of me.
Okay.
And then I came along, and I've got my sister and at least three other cousins that finished behind me.
Okay.
So we've got a tremendous kind of lineage, and not just there, but Clark as well as Bethune-Cookman and FAMU. So I've got a lot of historically Black college family members. And I got to Howard initially as a political science major,
Okay.
but frankly, business was always something that I had an interest in. And so I decided I was going to minor in business. And when I went over to take my first business class, I was like, oh no, this is where I'm supposed to be,
Yeah, okay.
not over in political science. And so I switched majors and just got immersed in everything business. I was, just really captivated with it. Had great summer internships working for the Federal Reserve Bank of
Okay.
Boston, and ultimately got recruited to New York to work on Wall Street, a bank that no longer exists called the Irving Trust Company.
Okay.
And went into banking, and after 24 years of doing that, I really wanted to do something different, something entrepreneurial, and as a result of some relationships I had in the Fayetteville area, and what I perceived at the time to be a really interesting market for growth opportunities, I came down.
Okay, that's good. I love what you said when you were talking about, first of all, being an aimless kid, but then again, you had a network within your family that saw the benefits of college and understood the value of college. So having family members guiding you was really, really, really lucky. Not lucky, but I think of the kids who don't have that, who
Yes,
don't have someone in their ear having those conversations about continuing your education. So you went to Howard and found your niche.
made all the difference in the world. The presumption that I was going to go to college was a given.
Okay.
There was never growing up. No, you're going to college. Uh, just exactly how that was going to happen was the question mark. And I can say without hesitation that going to Howard was the best decision I'd made at that point in my life.
Okay. So tell me a little bit more about the internships you talked about, because I'm always talking to kids about you've got to find internships and you can't just wait for them to come to you. You have to be a little proactive in getting out there once you get on campus to engage in those internships.
Well, the beautiful thing for us was all the companies came on campus to interview.
Okay.
So you could to have, and I'm talking the business school in particular, right?
Mhm.
The business school, the engineering school, back when I was in college, and to some extent the School of Communications, the companies came looking for us, and so I interviewed with all sorts of companies. I mean, and it's interesting how where you end up has such a big impact. I actually interviewed with a trucking company. I can't remember if they manufactured trucks, and they were headquartered in Seattle. And I interviewed with them. I interviewed with a number of other financial institutions, and ultimately, actually, the director of the Center for Banking said, "Well, there's an internship at the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, and they just allow me to pick a student and send sight unseen to into that opportunity." And so for that particular one, because of their relationship with the university, every year they sent somebody, and I was fortunate enough to be the person that they sent. And it was an amazing experience because most people don't understand the impact that the Federal Reserve Bank has on the entire economy.
Hmm. Well, that's great. That is fantastic. And that again, students, parents, families, whoever's listening to this now or on the replay, make sure you're having those conversations about internships, because that's a part of college that I think sometimes students overlook and don't understand the significance of them, especially in this day and age with our changing economy. So Darswell, so tell me a little bit about, so you're on Wall Street for 24 years. What was that like? You see the Wall Street movies.
Yes. Well, obviously, those are highly dramatized. And what's important to understand is that every single career job that there is in any other company, they have inside a financial institution. So you've got marketing jobs, you've got technology jobs, you've got
Mhm.
base accounting jobs, you've got processing checks, and there's Every job there is in a different company, you have one there. What makes the Wall Street experience in terms of the path I was on different was I was evaluating the risk of companies and making decisions about whether or not we would risk the company's capital
Okay.
in terms of extending loans. And for me, going back to my background in Los Angeles, I grew up in a community with a lot of entrepreneurs, and
Mm,
they always said that their great frustration was they didn't have access to capital. They had capital, they felt like they could have grown their businesses more.
okay.
And so when I got to Wall Street, I had two choices. I could go and learn how to lend to big companies like Shell Oil or General Motors or Chrysler, or I could decide I wanted to understand the dynamics in smaller companies and in mid-sized companies.
Okay.
And so, believe it or not, my definition of mid-size is under $1 billion. Okay,
Mm,
so for most people, that still is really, really large. But I wanted to interface with companies of that size, and the main reason is because you end up talking to the owner of the business or the president of the business and the chief financial officer. If you're dealing with some multinational and you're a junior person like I was, you're talking to somebody junior on the other side who doesn't have any better idea of what's going on inside their organization as I did inside mine. But within my first year and a half as a line banker, I actually loaned $1.5 billion for an acquisition of a $20 million company. And the CEO, the owner of that business, and I got to be good friends. And it was just a completely different experience. And you got a chance to see real time senior managers, senior leaders, owners putting their own money at risk and having to make those challenging decisions. So it was very interesting and gratifying.
okay. I think one of the things I also liked what you said about your experience on Wall Street is when you preface it with the fact that there are so many career pathways on Wall Street. Because again, most people, like when you think of Wall Street, and we think of all the movies and the traders and the craziness on the floor and what have you, and not thinking about all the other careers that allow that to happen.
The vast majority of people who work inside a bank are not doing what you see in the movie.
Yeah.
The vast majority of them, 15%, I'm making this number up, but I'd say 15, 20% are doing the sort of stuff that you're thinking of. That number's probably
Mhm.
high, actually. It's the blocking and tackling of processing checks, processing payments, uh, interfacing with people, facility management. I mean, everything.
Yeah. So that's why students out there, families out there, it's so important that you take this time um, to just start investigating what different careers are out there. What does it look like? What's the work environment like? And that's one of the reasons I love having these conversations, because I think it's so important for young folks, young Black and brown folks, to see people that look like them in different career fields. I know, I was talking a couple of years ago or with one of my colleagues, and we were talking about the first time we had a Black teacher in the classroom.
Mm,
Like for me, that wasn't until seventh grade.
mm.
Some people, said that it wasn't until high school, it wasn't until college. So again, representation matters. So I think it's so important that people understand that there are all these career pathways and that they too can pursue different pathways. So I thank you for that. So
Yeah,
after you left,
I'll quickly tell you perfect example. When I was coming out of high school,
mm,
when somebody said, "Oh, I'm going to be an engineer," I thought that was the guy that drove the train. So
oh,
I did not understand what engineering was. So perfect example.
yeah, but that's so true. That's why, I'm all about like career awareness, career development, career exploration. And it starts early. Like people say, well, why are we doing this? We'll do this 11th grade, 12th grade or what have you. There is so much we can do with kids developmentally that's developmentally appropriate when they're in elementary school, just exposing them to different things. I'm a big proponent of increasing your child's social capital. I mean, pre-COVID, I would tell people, take your kid to the museums, take your kid to, oops, Take your kid to, the arts museum, the children's museum. Here in Fayetteville, we used to have all our different folk festivals and what have you. Take your kids to these and then have conversations about what they saw afterwards. Take them to the library. There is so much programming going on at the library that is at no cost to you, that your tax dollars are paying for anyway, even though we're just getting back to some programming starting next month. But again, expose kids to these and have conversations about them. Because I know for me, being a first generation college student, and my mom didn't finish high school, so I knew what I knew about careers was just right in our little circle. So I really didn't know, but I knew I loved school. And I knew that, oh, teaching is a job that will keep you in a school. So for me, that made sense. That made absolute sense to do that.
And both of my sisters are teachers. I'm in the middle child, so both of them
Okay.
have pursued careers in education, and it's gratifying. It's been challenging, needless to say, tremendously
Yes.
challenging. But and I've got lots of teachers in my family broadly. So shout out to the teachers.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. Especially now during all this
COVID. Yeah.
craziness of trying to go back to school and be safe and also teach your lessons. You
Right.
know, let's add a little bit more stress on there. So when you left New York, did you immediately come to Fayetteville?
I did. So it was a plan. I had made an investment in some real estate in downtown Fayetteville a couple of years prior. And when I decided that I wanted to transition out, this was a period of time when BRAC was the kind of big rage here, was the branch reorganization,
Mm-hmm.
where Fort McPherson in Atlanta was being closed, and they were going to move all those people here to Fayetteville, and there were going to be more, and are today, more generals in Fayetteville than any place other than the Pentagon.
Mm.
And so, and the largest command, which is the Reserve Command, is here, and forces. So there was all this economic benefit that was supposed to come this direction. It was kind of getting out of the rat race with New York City, obviously lower cost environment. I had a friend here, came to town, met really so many of the leaders in the community. So it was very enticing. So that was actually the plan to move to Fayetteville.
Okay. And so when you moved here, what business did you start?
I had already started doing advisory work, so I had been
Okay.
been 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 coaching business owners principally. But then once I got here, that expanded into working with people who were running nonprofits as well as for-profit businesses.
Okay.
And you know, it is it's the challenge with making a living off of what you know,
Mm,
and you do that,
yes.
is people don't always see it with the same value than if you were to give them a product.
Right.
So if there's a product transferring, they look at the product and here's the price and they say, okay, I'll buy it or not buy it. But it's not unusual for a person just to walk up to me and say, hey, I got a question. And then I got another question. I got another question. So I'll ask
Mhm.
you a half a dozen business questions. But you couldn't walk into a store and say, hey, can I sample that and this and that and
Yeah.
that, and then walk out and say, hey, thanks very much for letting me sample all
Mhm.
your food, or sample all your products. So it's an interesting dynamic, but I just love so much, and I've learned so much that it's also partially giving back.
Yeah. I understand that so much because being in a field where it's knowledge based, um, and people will say, well, can I just ask you this question about
Mhm.
so and so's application? Or, well, what would I do about financial aid? And like you said, before you know it, okay, hours gone by and you've answered quite a few questions. I have learned, it's taken me time, but I have learned to um, answer so many and then say, okay, if you'd like to continue this conversation, here's my contact information, here's my calendar link,
Right.
and you can make an appointment. Um,
It's incredibly gratifying though to say. I mean, there's people that walk up to me and they say, man, I took your advice and this has really worked out for me. All right, you told me to do this and that really has paid off for me. So and I'm sure for you with students going off to college
Oh
making
God,
great
yes.
decisions. So be that they paid me or didn't pay me,
Right.
to have people give you feedback is really gratifying.
It is. It is. It is so gratifying. And it's funny because even as a classroom teacher and a high school counselor, I'm still in contact with a lot of students that I had back in Rhode Island back in the day.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
seeing them now as adults and the work that they're doing, I
Yes.
mean, it's incredible. And some of the kids I say, "Oh my God, you were like the biggest goof off in school." And like, look
Right.
at you. You know, you are making a difference every single day. So for me, teaching, you don't get rich teaching, that's for sure. But the payoff is years later when you see your kids out there succeeding, because there's nothing better than seeing a student that you had or somebody saying, you said such and such to me one day, and I stuck with that, and you didn't give up on me. Because for some reason I used to get the kids that a lot of times in my office that were challenging, and other people
Mhm.
had written them off. Um, and I just felt that, for me, it was always about I wanted to treat kids the way I wanted people to treat my kids.
Mhm.
So for me, that's what it was all about. So yeah, it is really gratifying when someone gives you a little bit of validation for the work that you do. So that is pretty neat. So I remember earlier in one of the early years when I knew you, you were running a like a small business networking meeting, and we used to meet up at the German restaurant.
Yes.
And I remember you offered everyone that was in the group, like I was like a 15-minute free coaching session every so often. And I remember, I think I was the only one that took
You
you up
were
on
the you were the only one that took me up on it.
And that always, like, I'm like, are these people like, why would you not do this? Because I had no business background when I started this. I mean, I'm an educator. That's it. And never in my wildest dreams did I think I'd be an entrepreneur. I just wanted to teach, 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 and be with kids, and that's it. And I was happy with that. So I knew that I needed help, and probably still do. But it I just remember some of the things you said, and again, like you said, when people come back, and I just think about, yep, go back and do this, and take your time doing this, and do this and do that, and a lot of those things are things that I have put into play over time. And I always go back to, yeah, I remember those 15-minute sessions, and you'd give homework, and yeah, and it was good for me because at that point, like I said, not knowing quite what I was doing on the business end of it, I kind of needed that accountability piece, or just someone saying, okay, you just take this one piece and go do it. So I really recommend anybody out there that's starting a business, get a coach right from the beginning.
Well,
Get a
that's what I
coach.
was about to say. Everybody needs a coach.
Yes.
I don't care if you are the chief executive officer of JP Morgan or if you are running your own small business. You need someone that is going to tell you the unvarnished truth, and they're going to
Yes.
be sensitive to where you are and have some perspective and some
Mhm.
wisdom that you don't have.
Yeah.
What the way the mind works, to go there for a second, is you have a challenge or a problem, right? And you begin to think about it, and then you think about it, and then you get distracted and you do something else, then you come back to that nagging problem. You think about it, you think about it. And what I find consistently is at some point you say you say, I'm going to talk to somebody about this. And then somebody say, hey, can I talk to you about this? And I say, sure. And then they start to talk, and then they'll talk themselves through the entire issue. And then they say, well, here are the options. And then they arrive at an option. And I really didn't say much, but they had
Mhm.
to hear it and talk it out. So that
Yes.
coach is the person that you, because when you verbalize stuff and you hear it, it's just so different than it being in your head.
Yes.
And so then having somebody that you respect, that you can have, that's not going to say, you're dumb or silly or what are you the heck are you talking about, and it's got some wisdom. It's big. It is really big,
It
and
is.
it'll accelerate your decision making. That's the key value of having a coach. is it will accelerate your decision making. And that's what you do as a counselor. That's what parents do for their kids. That's what your manager should be doing for you at work, is providing you with that guidance.
Oh God, that is so true. That is so true. Because I remember, so I've, like I said, when I first started out looking for that opportunities to learn from different coaches, and I remember I started going to Fayetteville Tech to their business seminars. And really started learning a lot. But I do remember when you talked about having somebody that helps you see your vision and accelerate your thinking and your learning. I do remember talking with someone there who doesn't work there anymore. I don't even think they live in the state anymore. And I talked about what I was doing, and at that point, my conversation was around, how do I price this for this area? And when I said what my pricing was going to be at that time, which was compared to other folks was relatively low, but I was just trying to figure out how do I start this? And this person laughed at me. I'll never forget. They laughed at me, said,
wow,
you'll never get that here. You'll never get that here. You must be, oh, that's, oh, no, that won't happen. And I remember sitting there saying, oh my God, this is the business professional who's coaching me, telling me this. And I'm already thinking, I know people in Cary and Raleigh and Durham that are doing this and charging more than what I just said.
Right.
So why would you tell me that? So I remember it really made me back off a little bit from coaching, because it made me a little skittish, because I'm like, wow, why would you tell me that? And it took a while for me to get back where I felt comfortable reaching out to people and asking questions, and and going to the different seminars and talking with other folks about it, because that just kind of like put me off, because I was already nervous about being an entrepreneur, and then somebody goes, oh, you're not gonna do that, and I'm like, okay, you're the expert.
There's the breadth of the quality and the competency of people in a given profession. It's like a mile wide. And regrettably, what I found, particularly in some of the organizations that are kind of government oriented, that the people have a degree maybe, but they don't necessarily have any real true depth of experience.
Yes.
What have they run a business? Have they seen businesses in good economies and bad? Have they, experienced making a payroll? Have they, if you're going to give somebody else advice, you need to have bruised knees. You need to have had those sleepless nights. And the notion that giggling and laughing at somebody, that's just really unfortunate. Well, thankfully you didn't pay attention.
I didn't, because I knew once I had made up my mind to do this, I knew that it was the place that I needed to be. I just had to figure out what that looked like for me. Aside from transitioning from New England to Fayetteville, I had to figure out what that business was going to look like. So for folks that are listening in, or folks that are joining us, please, if you have any comments, put them in the comment section so that you can join the conversation. For those of you that are just tuning in, I have with me this evening Darsweil Rogers, who is a thought leader, a business coach, an advisor, co-owner of a restaurant with his son, and he's also the host of Grow Your Business, which is a radio show every Friday morning at 9 a.m. on WIDU Radio, 1600 a.m. So Darsweil, talk to me a little bit about Grow Your Business and the radio show.
Yeah, so it started, I don't know, 10 years ago, something like that. The owners of the station, Western Sandy Cookman, I got to know them early in my time here in Fayetteville, and I, did a little bit of work for them, and they really felt that I was bringing a perspective on things that was unique to the community and would bring value. And so they offered me the opportunity to have a program, and I have done it fairly consistently. It's at least 10 years, and Similar to you, and for those who don't know, Belinda has been on my show, and you can find it on my Facebook page. But she's probably joined me 4, 5, 6 times, something like that. But I cross the spectrum, and I leave the community to interview people from the head of the economic development in the chamber to successful business owners who have really made it, to talking to people who are budding entrepreneurs, and then just kind of everything in the middle. And I take a reasonable amount of time on given programs to just talk business. So I love Black Enterprise has something called Black Enterprise Daily. So every day you can sign up and get an email from them that talks about half a dozen business activities that are taking place, or successful business people. For instance, those who are familiar with there's a hamburger chain called Fuddruckers,
Mm,
and an African American guy who's actually an HBCU graduate, I forget from where, just
yes.
bought the entire franchise.
Yeah.
So, if you're up north, the Fuddruckers, I don't know if there's been any down this way,
Mm,
but a perfect example of the sort of information that you might not otherwise hear about. So the Black Enterprise Daily, I highly recommend. And I'm querying business people, and I really like to understand, ask them about some challenges or some trials and tribulations, because frequently people see people that are successful, and they're successful, and not understanding just what it took to to get there. So those lessons learned in those periods where maybe you thought you made the wrong decision, but you persevered. I think those are key things for people to hear about.
yeah. One of my favorite guests that you've had on several times is your friend that has the hot chicken.
Yes.
And I love listening to the lessons that he learned pre-COVID, and also the pivoting that they did during COVID to keep the business going.
So we talk about Nashville hot chicken, or I'm sorry, Hotville. Hotville is what
Hotville.
it's called,
Yeah.
but it's based on Nashville hot chicken. And yes, they opened their doors in like December or November of 2019, and obviously COVID hit in early 2020,
Mm,
and they were going gangbusters. And of note, and they're in Los Angeles, by the way. And
yeah.
of note, Los Angeles Magazine ranked them just whatever the last, I guess probably at the end of 21, end of 20, as one of the 5 best restaurants in Los Angeles, which is about as
Okay.
prestigious in terms of LA recognition as you can get.
Right.
And so his name's Greg Doolin, and by the way, he's second generation in the food business, and his family together they've got 4 restaurants, and that Hotville is just is one of the 4, and the other 3 are kind of more traditional soul food.
Okay. I'd recommend to anyone, if you can, to find those recordings, because I know every time Greg has been on, I learned something, or he points out something, or he always has something motivational that sticks with you, and you figure out, okay, how can I apply this to what I'm doing? I'm not in the food business, in the hospitality business, but when he talks about the resilience and the grit, and especially when he was on and he was talking about how he pivoted during that, he started doing, the takeouts and
Yes.
what have you. I'm just like, okay, this is what you do. You don't just sit there and go, woe is me. You figure out another way to do what it is you do.
There's and Greg and I go back to the 3rd grade together, so he is my closest friend,
Mhm.
and we discovered the book Think and Grow Rich at the same time our freshman year at Howard, or maybe sophomore year at Howard. And the one concept in that book that has stuck with us is your greatest success is steps beyond what you perceive to be your greatest failure. So the failure comes, and the question is, are you going to persevere, or are you going to quit? And you don't get to that great success if you don't persevere through what you at that moment in time feel to be some sort of failure. And so he has exhibited that level of resiliency so many times in his career, and is really he's considered soul food royalty in Los Angeles, and of note is one of the designated caterers for the Super Bowl 22, Super Bowl next
Oh,
February. 'Cause the Super Bowl is going
great.
to be at SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles, and so he's been identified as one of the preferred providers to do catering
Oh my
for the Super
God.
Bowl. So he's a player. He's a
Yes.
real player out
That's
west.
fantastic. That's fantastic. What you were just saying, in talking about Greg and talking about the whole thing about failure. So a lot of times when I walk in the morning, if I'm not walking with my walking partner on the trail, I'm walking, around, and I always listen to a podcast. And the other
Mhm.
day I was listening to a podcast, Guy Raz, and he was interviewing Adam Grant, who is a, organizational psychologist. So he does a lot of work around helping, looking at how organizations work and how people think and work within organizations. And the topic was a failure. It was about failure, and it was about how we look at failure and how it's something that we all go through, and we have to, um, he didn't quite say normalize it, but it, like what you said, it's something we have to go through. You don't know how well or how much you're going to be sticking with something, how resilient you're going to be until something happens. Well, look at all of us with COVID. I mean,
Mhm.
those of us that were doing the work that I do, quite a few of us met with our students in person. Now it's like, okay, we're not meeting in person. What do we do? Everybody went to Zoom. Um, and it's funny in talking to my colleagues, and we're talking about, so are you going to go back to in person? Most of us actually have found out that this is actually more efficient, especially for
Mhm.
students once they get back in school and they have their sports teams and their other activities and everything else they're doing. This allows them to still have this full service without having to factor in travel time, because
If I were to comment, my first thing, and I uh, appreciate the comment about the guy who does the organizational psychology. What I call myself, and I rarely say this, but I consider myself a student of the human condition. I, I I spend my time understanding how people and teams and organizations function, and they
yes.
all function from the perspective of, in simple terms, what's in it for me? Why should I do
Mm,
that? What do I get out of it? And 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 dealing with the risk of loss, dealing with the potential embarrassment of not succeeding is what drives most people. And in simple terms, it's fear. And we experience that through our entire lives, and we have to just overcome these phases in life. And how do you do that? Where do you get the gumption? Where do you get the confidence? Where do you get the I will never quit no matter what, is is so core to success
mm,
at every level. And it's very interesting because my parents were not the rah rah kind of parents. Their basic attitude was, if your clothes are clean, your teeth are brushed, you're as good as anybody. And
mhm.
so, so none of this. Oh, you're wonderful, hip ha rah rah. You're supposed to get good grades.
Yeah.
And so you've got to find that source within you to do things. And you have to, there's this notion of cause and effect. Something happens, and as a result of something, good or bad happens.
Yeah.
And there's a psychologist out there that talks about causing the effect. So you want to
Mm,
cause the outcomes that you want instead of waiting for something to happen to you. You want to put your imprint and go for it, and then you don't learn anything until you get the feedback, and the feedback is that disappointment. And that another saying, there is no failure, only feedback. And it is only feedback if you keep going. It's failure if you stop. And
oh,
so it
I love
doesn't matter at
that.
what level you are in life. Certainly
Yeah.
as a teen, man, I went through more than a few moments of trauma where I
Mhm.
thought something horrible was happening. In reality, I can't even remember what most of them were, but they
Yes.
felt like big deal at the time. So you really have to just keep moving.
I love what you said. You don't know it's failure if you stop, if you don't pay attention to the feedback. Because if you just stop, I think about when I moved here in my head, because of my academic background and my CV that was like 12 to 13 pages long, all this great stuff I had did. I said, I won't have a problem getting a job here in Fayetteville. I'm good on paper. Look at me.
Right.
36 applications later and still no job. It was devastating because I'm like, I hadn't had to look for a job in I don't know how many years. And now I'm like, okay, now what's wrong with me? You start having that whole imposter syndrome and all that other stuff starts going on. And I went home to a conference, and one of my friends in admissions, I was like, whining and what have you. And she looked at me, she goes, you need to put your big girl panties on and cut this out.
There you go.
She goes, I don't want to hear this. She goes, you're better than that. She said, so you need to figure out what it is you're going to do, because unless you're moving back here, you need to figure out how you're going to do what you need to do there. And that's kind of what got me started. So she had said, being independent, and I started looking into it and doing my research, and actually did get a coach for 6 months who had transitioned, because I was looking for someone who had been a school counselor that went into this so they could understand where I was coming from. And I found a woman that did that. And actually, for 6 months, she coached me through starting the business, do I want an LLC, and everything. And it really ended up being an investment in myself. Mm-hmm. It was an investment in myself.
That's what you call causing the effect.
Yeah.
You cause the effect versus the effect being something that was imposed upon you.
Yeah. Because I said,
that's really what it's about.
Yeah. So we have with us one of my favorite people from the audience, Michelle Burden. She said she always asks for feedback. Now, Michelle is local here, and Michelle has a company where she business wraps, and it's collard wraps, and they are absolutely delicious. So I know her dream is to have a food truck eventually. So I know she's working on that, and she does ask for feedback, because I know when I get my wraps, she'll ask me about were they okay, were they good, what did you think about them, and they're delicious, Michelle. I love your wraps, and I know that I'm going to see you with that food truck one day too, because you're just that type of person to keep it going.
Just to go back to Greg Doolin for a second, he is. And I'm going to knock here. He's allegedly coming to town in the middle of September.
Okay.
He wrapped a food truck, and he's been operating his food truck now for maybe 6 months or a little bit less.
Okay.
So Michelle, you might he's been at it. He's been in the restaurant business for 30 years. Finally bought a food truck, and interestingly enough, one of the reasons why he got it when he did was he shut down his main restaurant to do a complete renovation. Okay. And so that his customers didn't have to go with not being able to get food, he's in effect selling a more limited menu out of his food truck, right? So it's like literally parked in front of the restaurant. Mm-hmm. So it's all sort of creative strategies you have to do when to get from point A to point B.
Right. So, okay, Michelle, I'll have to keep in touch with Darsweil. So when we see when Greg is coming to Fayetteville, who knows, who knows? Maybe I'll get him on the show to do a little thing for us. Who knows?
There you go. It'd be like around the 20th, 24th, 21st, 22nd, 23rd, like right in there.
Oh, good. Maybe he'll be here for my birthday, and then we can have a conversation.
When's your birthday?
September 23rd.
Was that a Wednesday or Thursday? That's a Thursday.
I think it's a Thursday. Yeah, this year.
It's a Thursday.
But that's okay. We don't have to do this on Mondays. We could always switch up. It's my show. I can do it when I want it to.
A special episode, a special edition.
Yes. Oh, I love that. Oh my goodness, that would be so great. So tell me, so one of the things I know about you is that you give back to the community quite a bit. Like I said, when you were running that that business networking group. I mean, nobody was paying you for that. I mean, you were doing it, and you were doing it, on a weekly basis, and it was great. So I know you also serve on the board of the PWC. So tell us a little bit about that, because
Well,
that's a lot.
ironically, you should bring that up. My last board meeting is Wednesday, September 22nd.
Oh,
My 8 years term is up, and Greg has been threatening to come visit me forever. And I said, well, my last board meeting. He says, okay, I'm coming. So they're actually going to have a little something that day for me, and but to come back to your question, working for the utility has been incredibly gratifying. It's been 8 years, and folks do not realize until things like what's going on with Ida right now, where
mhm,
there's close to 1 million people without electricity or water, to
right.
truly understand what we have in having a hometown utility. And they're without water and without electricity. Most people don't realize without electricity you can't get water to the house.
Mm,
So and they're talking 7 days plus to get the electricity going, which means there won't be any water for people. The dedication of that workforce is extraordinary. We truly have one of the best utilities in the country. They are recognized and rewarded as such. We've got a fantastic CEO, Elena Ball, who came on in December and has done wonderful things for us. And there's the commission, the 4-member commission that sets the policy and the direction. Uh, don't understand the level of involvement in decision making that's involved. The PwC does about $400 million in revenue, and it's got about $1.5 billion in assets, and it supports so much of the economic development opportunities in our community. It does simple things like the lights that are downtown. We string
mm,
those lights to make this community festive. The entire city now has LED lighting, so which is
mhm.
the best, brightest
Yes.
lights that are most energy efficient. That's something that we provide and don't charge the city for. So, and when you have events like we had Hurricanes Florence and Matthew,
Mhm.
um, they are dealing with your problems instead of the fact that their own families may not have lights or water. And so they're first responders, just like our police and fire. And when you see those guys in those trucks and those ladies in those trucks, understand and appreciate the commitment that they're making to the community as well.
Right. That is, I mean, in watching the destruction that we're seeing now with Hurricane Ida, and with, all of New Orleans right now without power, as you said, it makes you really appreciate what you have. And like you said, until people don't know, I had an opportunity to do a community day with PwC pre-COVID, where we got to ride around to different utility sites around
Mhm.
around Fayetteville. And it was, I remember initially I was like, all right, I'm going to do this, but I don't know what it's going to. It was fascinating.
Yes.
It was absolutely fascinating to get the behind the scenes talk about this is how this operates. And like you said, the staff at each one of those facilities, they were so proud of the work they did. They were, it was like it was their baby.
Yes. And so I talked a little bit about the electric side, but think about the water side. We
Yeah.
take water out of the Cape Fear River, we process it, we purify it, right? And then we pump that to all these houses across the
Mm,
community. And then that water returns back to a different plant that we have, and we have to pull out all of the impurities and put it back in the river.
yeah.
Um, the engineering, uh, the um, the processes whereby every single time you turn a faucet, every single time you flip a switch, it works.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many. There may be more countries in the world where that's not true than where it is true.
Yeah.
And so we take these things for granted.
Yeah, that is so true. So again, so I didn't realize your time was coming up on the board. So thank you
Done.
for your service. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, so you've been on the board almost as long as I've known you. So yeah.
That's yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so that is true. So tell me a little bit. So I know you have a partnership with Cape Fear Partners
Yes.
Innovation. So tell me about that. So that's with David. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Cape Fear Partners is how we initially started the company. We changed to we put in a brand, a trade name, CFP Innovation, candidly, because our expectation when we first started the business was that we were going to do most of our business around the Cape Fear region.
Hmm.
And that hasn't been the way it played out. And so once you leave the Cape Fear region and you say Cape Fear anything, people say, "You mean the movie?" And we were like, "No, not the movie." So we need a trade name. So we went to CFP Innovation. And what we help organizations do is to re-envision their companies. Just like COVID has impacted and pushed everybody into a digital environment,
Mhm,
there were companies, we saw this coming. We knew this was coming. It's just that COVID was kind of like that big punch in
mm,
the face that forced the transition right away. And so, there's three key elements that we find to most organizations. How are you going to manage technology? How are you going to manage your people? And what business processes or business model are you going to use to accomplish that?
okay.
And we help organizations think that through. It's from the strategy point of view all the way down through the implementation. It comes down to how to identify, recruit, retain, and educate talented people. It comes
Mhm,
down to thinking about how do you intermix various types of technologies together to leverage the potential capabilities, because today your competitor can come from anywhere, literally from
yes.
anywhere. And we're seeing that in the utility business, by the
Mhm,
way, that their competitors is not the next utility. It's somebody that's got solar panels and battery, and they want to put it on your customer's um, house or factory, and they're
mhm,
going to literally take that energy away from us and use it in a different way. So we end up working with a lot of senior leadership teams from Fortune 50 companies down to small businesses. I mean, locally, we've worked with the Greater Fayetteville Chamber, we've worked with the Arts Council, we've worked with H&H Homes and other organizations. So, we really um, have our fingers and our hands in what's going on locally, but we've got clients as far away as Nebraska and Los Angeles and Chicago. So, and I'm coming right here out of Fayetteville. People
yeah,
don't realize the talent that's in Fayetteville. They really don't.
they don't. They don't. You're so you're so right. I remember, as I started, my business and was going out to different networking events and just sitting there listening, and I'm like, wow, there's some people here that are doing some fabulous things, and their names weren't on the tips of everyone's tongue, but they were the movers and shakers who were getting things done, um, and who had successful businesses, and were able to do like what you're doing with helping people. And because you're one of those people in the community that I'm always like saying to people, you don't know Darsweil Rogers? Well, that's somebody that you should know, because for me, it just feels like you have your finger on a lot of things. You have the pulse of this community,
Mm.
and you have a way of talking about the community and talking with people in a way, first of all, that they can understand. Um, and you're always sincere and authentic in whatever you're talking about. So I know personally, I appreciate that, because I always feel like I feel like any conversation that I have with you, I'm gonna come away either knowing something or feeling better or just something. So I thank you for that, because it does make a difference. It does make need difference.
Well, thank you for the compliment. I've learned to just say thank you when people compliment you instead of something else. I appreciate that.
Yes.
Listen, the people in our community are smart as they are anywhere in the world.
Yes.
What we really have to come to grips with is what we talked about a little bit earlier: resiliency, having a
Mm,
mindset and an expectation that good things will happen in the future. Um, One of my favorite mentors says that you need to be focused on the instead of focus on the memories of the past, you need to be developing things based on your vision of the future. And I think that so often we are talking about what happened yesterday and
right.
last year and 10 and 15 and even 100 years ago,
Mhm.
and we're basing today and tomorrow on that versus saying, well, what is it that we're looking for? What can we aspire to? That is going to define where this community goes, not what happened yesterday.
Oh, that is so true. For those of you that are listening in and you want to know how to get in touch with Darsweil, this is his email address. And on here, you can also connect with them on LinkedIn. I am a huge fan of LinkedIn.
Absolutely.
It is one of my favorite platforms for business, for networking, for connecting with people. And for me, it's been the gift that keeps on giving. I'm just like a big fan of LinkedIn, so I can't say enough about it. So again, if you're looking to get in touch with Darsweil, this is his email address, and you can also connect with him on LinkedIn. Now, I'm going to just give you a little hint. If you're going to connect with somebody on LinkedIn, don't just hit that connect button and send them a generic message. Just send that generic, I want to connect with you. Take the time to go in and personalize the message and say, hey, I heard you on Conversation with Dr. B, and I'd
Mhm.
like to connect with you and possibly have a conversation. So do that. So anytime you're connecting with somebody on LinkedIn, make sure you personalize it. Put a note in there. Don't just hit that connect button. That is so cool. LinkedIn's all about networking and building relationships. And this is
Absolutely.
and this is how you do it. So one of the things I'm going to switch over to, people who know me know that I love books. Everything about reading. I'm a little sad because my term on the library board will be ending in December, but I've already told them, I said, okay, I have to stay off a year. So I plan on coming back. You're not going to get rid of me. So one of the things I always ask folks is what books would they recommend? And you actually had a list of books that you recommended. You had Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill,
Yep.
Miseducation of the Negro by Carter G. Woodson, and Destruction of Black Civilization by Chancellor Williams. So tell me about those books and what made you choose those.
Well, I give those books to every student that I have gotten to know when they graduate from high school. So
Okay.
those are my go-to books from a graduation point of view. Obviously, I'm talking about Black and Brown, people, and and Destruction of Black Civilization is going to be the most comprehensive story you will ever read on the richness and the depth and the success of African culture, unvarnished by kind of our a European perspective, and it will
Mhm.
also explain, well, if you had all these great kingdoms in the past, how is it that they don't appear to be great today? So it provides you with a good, solid foundation that hey, we've achieved incredibly great things in the world, and so that's why Destruction of Black Civilization. Miseducation of the Negro.
Mhm.
Carter G. Woodson started the Negro History Week at the
Yes.
beginning of the 1900s, and that has now morphed into the Black History Month. And let's understand that Black history is American history, so it should not be limited to a month. But setting
Right.
that to aside for a second, chapter one of the Miseducation of Negro, the topic of the chapter one is the seed of the problem. And it says the seed of the problem in the miseducation Negro is the educated Negro. So it is the fact that those of us that have the knowledge and the intellect and the capacity to do something different are not living up to the obligations that we should have in terms of the uplifting of where we are. So that's why I do miseducation Negro. And then Think and Grow Rich basically is the foundation. And there's other books that have come along, but this is the book I discovered when I was a freshman at Howard that
Okay.
says anything that your mind can conceive, it can achieve. And so, whatever it is that happened in the past, whatever it is, if you experienced not being able to sit at lunch counters, if your granddaddy and your great grandma told you about lynchings, and if all these horrible things that have happened to the African American race throughout history
Mhm.
does not change the fact that anything your mind can conceive, it can achieve. And so let's not create roadblocks when in reality we have the mental capacity with resilience to overcome them.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I love that. It's funny because I remember reading The Miseducation of the Negro actually when my African American history class in college. I remember using that book when I became a social studies teacher and introduced it to students in our Black history class, high school students. Um, so that is definitely one that I think is something so important for students to do. And the other two, I heard of Think and Grow Rich, but I've never read it. But I actually, when I was going through your book list, I said, okay, I've got to order Destruction of Black Civilization because I need to read that. I was reading the description of it, and I said, okay, this is another one of those books that I need to read for the context and for the history and to be able to have conversations with students about this is from where we came and this is what we need to do to um, build
Can I
upon it.
throw two other quick books in there that I've added to the list after you did that real fast?
Sure.
One of them is called What to Say When You Talk to Yourself.
Ooh.
Shad Helmstetter, I may have his last name wrong. Shad Helmstetter. What do you say when you talk to yourself? Because your biggest critic is what you say to yourself. And so, if you can modify the communications that you have with yourself, your capacity to have resilience and the like is significantly better. And then the last book is called The Art of Learning, and it's by Josh Waitzkin. If you are either a fan of movies about chess or know about chess, there was a movie and a book called Searching for Bobby Fischer,
Mhm.
and that was the story. His dad wrote the story about Josh Waitzkin. So he became, an incredibly famous chess player. But at the age of 19, he gave up chess and took up Tai Chi. And ultimately, Tai Chi is a meditation art that turns into a martial art called push hands. And he picked up the sport at the age of 19 and became a world champion in a sport that most people start learning when they're kids. And so went through the mental processes of chess and learning a brand new martial art at the age of 19 that I find extraordinarily helpful in terms of developing one's mental toughness. So I've added those two to my list, even since you asked me for this 3 weeks ago. And I've read both books, and I'm on my second go round of reading The Art of Learning because I'm just a big fan of both of those as well.
Thank you for those. I am trying to add them to the chat really fast. So, what do you say when you talk to yourself?
Yeah.
By Shad Helmstetter.
Helmstead. Yeah. How do you pronounce that? Yeah.
Yeah, and I will get the other one up
The
here
Art of
before we
Learning.
move. The
The
Art
Art
of
of
Learning.
Learning. Josh Waitzkin. Waskin.
Okay, let me get those up here. So, in the last few minutes we have, what advice would you give to someone who is considering becoming an entrepreneur?
Um, what would the advice be I'd give to someone considering being an entrepreneur? To take action and not spend a whole lot of time thinking about it. What you need to do is to test what you believe to be your idea before you spend a whole lot of time writing business plans. Can you go out in the marketplace and sell or do whatever it is? You've got a job, but let's operate on the assumption that you've got something that you're doing today. Can you make a living doing this idea? Um, Introduce it to people, try and sell it, get the feedback. Until you have feedback, you don't know how valid it is. This goes into the concept called lean startup. You've got to take action. You've got to get your idea in the marketplace, because you will tweak it. What people spend all this time doing is thinking, or talking to a couple of close people while they help you think it through. And then you've got this big idea. And some people even like they go and they sign a lease, and they do all these things to like open this thing before they actually know whether or not the marketplace wants it. So
Right.
you've got to get some sort of feedback and validation in small increments. Take small risks instead of the big risk on the front
Okay.
end, because it will help you to navigate through some of the mistakes that you might have otherwise made.
Uh, God, I wish I had listened to that advice when I first started. I was telling a young lady who reached out to me about starting her business as an independent educational consultant. And I just said, okay, here are the things I learned that I should not have done. So I said, so learn from those lessons. And I said, I said, and some of them were things that people said, yeah, I don't know if you want to do that kind of advertisement for your business and stuff. I'm like, oh yeah, let me try it. And I'm like, okay, lesson learned on that one, but I learned my lesson.
Right.
So that was really good. Darsweil, this has been great. I am very, very happy that you were able to do this with us this evening. For those of you that are just tuning in or are watching this on the replay, my guest this evening is Darsweil Rogers, who is considered a thought leader, business coach, and advisor, business strategist. And if you're listening to this on the replay, make sure you listen to all of it, because he just dropped so many wonderful tips and strategies that you can use in growing your business and also just in life in general. So Darsweil, thank you so much for being here this evening.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me, Dr. B.
You are so welcome. So folks, join in next Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern time. And hopefully I'll have another guest. If not, you get me giving you some more tips and strategies on college and career planning for your students and for your family. So take care, everyone. And thank you again for joining in with us this evening.